The progression for Sanji from hating the raid suit to using it with a smirk on his face was not as sudden as it seems. Things get lost in translation as time passes, and I think this is one of those times. I love the fact that my friends and I disagree about shit because at times I learn from them and them from me, but also it's entertaining. With this topic, we don't agree as most are, citing it as quote-unquote bad writing. Now, personally, I don't like saying that due to the weekly nature in which we read a story, and things can be altered drastically with 17 new pages. It's happened time and time again. We are forced to draw conclusions on a weekly basis and somehow predict what would happen based on our conclusions. The issue really comes from the fact that we would do so many things differently previous times in the story. So any conclusion we draw will not be similar to the actual author of the story. It just isn't our story. We generally fall into the echoes of what we want to happen as opposed to logically what will indeed happen. I say all this to really say we gotta chill with how easily we jump to conclusions. Granted, wanting to see a wins from Sanji is understandable, I suppose, but I don't think that's necessary at all. I mean, we want progression of characters, right? Regardless, the point of the video is Sanji and his somewhat abrupt, quote-unquote, change in ideals. We know the tormented past of Sanji and the history with his family and how much he despises them. Well, should that be despises or despised? Nevertheless, that was apparent throughout the entirety of Wholecake Island. The first mention of Sanji's affiliations with the Germa revolved around Judge's wishes, and Sanji makes it known rather early that they have been through for quite a while. The thing with declarations is that they're fleeting and it depends on the situation, because Sanji on the very next page makes the declaration that his hands are only meant for his companions and nothing else. We know how that ended. However, this is an example of how quickly things can change in a character. The reason for making the cake essentially helped his friends, but was somewhat detrimental. But then why did it happen? That's a completely separate topic. But this is an example of Sanji, the same character, saying he would not do something, then doing the complete opposite by the end of the arc. Situations change, things change, and people have to change and adapt for it. I get the entire Germa thing and Sanji's disdain for these people. It's well documented. At the beginning of Wholecake, Sanji would not even entertain or discuss Germa with Vito, Reiju, or Judge. He made short work of Yanji, who was wearing a raid suit and was challenged by his father to speak with their fists. I mean, while fighting, the soldiers then state Sanji is so tough that he's not even wearing a raid suit. This could mean one of two things. Sanji is either very strong without it, or Sanji can be much stronger with this item. The mere existence of the Vinsmoke are a contradiction for Sanji. He stated himself that everything the Vinsmoke stand for are counter to his ideals. This is in regards to wasting food and hitting women as Niji was so fond of, amongst other things. Oda made a point to give Sanji, even throughout the off-putting moments with the Vinsmoke and the constant reminders of the past and the terrors of his family, a light within all of that shit. Reiju, she was the one responsible not only for Sanji's escape, but also for the reassurance of himself. She also gave him the rundown on his brothers, where this is not absolving them of any wrongdoing, but just simply providing context. Not having emotions and unable to disobey their father, they were essentially products of their environment. The thing that makes convincing people of Sanji's change so difficult is the missteps he had in this arc. The most major one is the lack of belief in his captain and then essentially attacking his captain. Let's try to understand his mindset. And I think it was to protect his captain. Well, obviously it was to protect his captain and his crew due to being limited with the explosives on his wrist in which Big Mom had the keys. Rationalizing that surely Luffy cannot take on Big Mom right now and losing his arms would make him worthless to the crew. Perhaps sacrificing himself and his life is the best way to save the crew at this point, and that's how he rationalized it. The situation was extremely dire. Some would say mostly because of his doing. He shouldn't have gone with Capone. But how many people would react differently if their family is threatened? The counterpoint to that is that you're a pirate and this is expected. Ties that you have should ultimately be severed. Of course, this plan somewhat succeeded because Germa assumed the ties were severed. However, sacrificing a comrade is not what the Straw Hats are about. It was even highlighted in chapter 930 that Luffy and Law are just fundamentally different as people and pirate captains. Law told them if they're captured, they would have to die with their mouths shut and would probably understand Sanji's reasoning and would say it's a sound plan. This isn't necessarily justification for a bad decision, but a different perspective through the eyes of another pirate captain. I think Oda brilliantly, after shedding light on the Vinsmokes and their ideals, used the closest sibling to Sanji and placed her in a position to test these ideals. How I see it is that Oda said the Vinsmokes are contradictory to these ideals, so let's see what he does once he knows that his sister and brothers will be executed by the Big Mom pirates. Throughout the story, Sanji has been painted as a good person, and of course, good people do good things. What set the stage for this was Reiju being captured by Pudding and somewhat tortured, and everything being revealed to Sanji bit by bit, and seeing his ultimate plan fold right before his eyes. This presented a shift for Sanji on several levels, which placed his family in a different light. They were no longer his oppressors. He would have to aim higher, the Big Mom pirates. And then the outcomes of this revelation. Not only are you now faced with saving your family that you absolutely despise and your ideals being put to the test, your previous pleading to the Big Mom pirates to spare the Straw Hats, and the master plan to convince the Vinsmokes were utterly useless. They were never the problem. They were your problem, but not the crew's problem. And with this, you involve the crew in your problems. You have to fix this. Think about it. If Big Mom was willing to execute the Vinsmoke, what would that mean for her promise to Sanji about the Straw Hats? This conundrum actually provided a moment of clarity, and a chapter even titled Germa's Failure was brilliant because it gave Sanji context in regards to why he was different, and he showed obvious care for Reiju while reiterating the hate for his brothers. I think this chapter made it a bit easier for Sanji to save his family, but Reiju definitely was the shining moment in this chapter. Another important piece of this is Zeph. Reiju explicitly states that Big Mom does not care about Zeph. Her family are the ones who threaten him. So leaving Germa to perish would essentially kill two birds with one stone. So now again, it made it difficult. If this was clear in the beginning, would Sanji's decisions have been different? I don't think so, but it's hard to say because it is a key factor due to what Zeph means to Sanji. Zeph is the reason why Sanji is who he is. The apprehension with hating his family and saving them came to a head, I think, during the wedding after they were surrounded by the Big Mom pirates. Of course, the plan was to save them, but the story went about emphasizing that his brothers were the products of his father. They were essentially not human as stated by Reiju. They could not react to them possibly dying or even their father possibly dying. The reaction of Judge was also an illuminating thing because this is a monster finally getting what he somewhat deserved. A monster who had essentially abused you as a child had finally met his match and was crying, asking for an explanation. For years, Sanji was abused and was not even sure why he was different, why he was being abused. Why was he unlike the others? Why was he weak? Something stood out to me, and Sanji didn't say these words, but they definitely resonated. Reiju said that seeing Sanji had redeemed her heart after living in shame for years with a Vinsmoke name. She was then essentially proud of some conscience being in their bloodline. I think this was somewhat passing of the torch, narratively speaking, as Sanji as the new representative of the Vinsmoke. This is somewhat validated by his bounty poster. However, the moment in which it rang the most true is as he saves his family, looking down at them as to say, I am so much better than you in so many ways. You do not deserve to have me save you, but you have been saved by your sacrifice. I am the successful experiment that you were not responsible for. That affected Judge's pride. Yes, throughout this arc, the roller coaster of emotions are insane. We can go chapter by chapter and just talk about the emotions that are overflowing in every chapter. Of course, when you're expecting more action and you get emotion, it is received in a different way. But I think the most pivotal moment came in Big Father with Judge's and Sanji's conversation. Judge questioned Sanji as to why he saved them, and Sanji, he overcame a past that predates even Zeph, and that was huge. The hate for his family absolutely had not subsided, but this man had outgrown the pain. He was a different man now, and being shackled by the Vinsmoke name would not be a part of his life anymore. Saving his family was not only a testament to his true father, Zeph, but also to himself and who he is as a man. You are not my father, Vinsmoke Judge. In that moment, Judge understood Sanji had overcome whatever shackles they had over him, and Reiju, she knew it as well. She nodded in approval, or smiled approvingly. The point I'm trying to get across with this entire thing is that this experience was liberating. Literally, he had no more questions about his past, who he is, or why he was. It was all explained. I'm different because of my mother, who I cared for deeply, and I'm respected by the people that I care about. Also, Germa is not entirely bad. There's some light in Germa in the form of my sister. It's interesting that Germa also progressed slightly, but somewhat inconsistently after Sanji saves them. From not caring of their own death, along with their fathers, to Niji caring for Reiji and Yanji caring for Judge. Some could call it progression, but whatever, at least Ichiji remains consistent. Well, to wrap this up, I've been going on for a while. Sanji's experiences yielded outcomes that we couldn't initially predict, but being one of the more difficult characters to gauge at times, this much is clear. Using this raid suit is not and was not an abrupt thing. Being forgiven and accepted back by his captain after the confidence being swayed, using the raid suit for their goals would be nothing but expected. Overcoming his family was the test from the beginning of the arc, so to get to this point, he would have no hesitation. Also, to clarify, Sanji never once stated he would never use the raid suit. He stated he would not rely on it to be stronger. The raid suit in chapter 930 specifically being used, as Sanji categorized it, as a gimmick to hide his identity and to ultimately help his crew. So leave your thoughts below. What do you think about Sanji using this raid suit? Is it justified? Do you feel like it should have been more of a build-up? And would you have liked to see Sanji test the raid suit out before he ultimately decided what it can do? Of course, I had my qualms about that, and I actually feel like he'd used it already to know exactly what it would do and how it would hide his face, but that remains to be seen. Of course, everything I've said today about Sanji overcoming all of this is really how I feel about the situation, but if Sanji ever uses the raid suit to be stronger, it can be viewed in a negative light, but it also can be viewed as progression. He did say, I will never use the raid suit to be stronger, but he also did say, I will never, ever cook for someone other than my comrades. Things change, situations change, and people have to adapt to them. Leave your thoughts below. Of course, feedback is welcome. Let me know how you feel. Like the video. Please be sure to subscribe, and I'll talk to you guys later. Peace.